Welcome back to the Deep Dive, listeners. You guys have sent in some really fascinating stuff this time around, and it's all about glider flight,
It is.
which I've got to say is pretty captivating stuff when you really start to think about it. So in this deep dive, we're going to be trying to extract the core principles, the real nuts and bolts, if you will, of how gliders launch, how they stay up there, how they soar, and of course, how they land safely.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to uncover some surprising things along the way, some practical insights that are going to be, interesting and relevant to anyone who is, well, fascinated by aviation in general, or even just the physics of flight. How do things stay up in the air?
That's a good question.
Big question, right?
It is.
So to get us started, we've got this document that you guys have sent in. I believe it's called GH-FH7.pdf.
That's the one.
And it really is a comprehensive guide. I mean, this thing covers every phase of glider operations from, how you handle it on the ground before you even get in the air, all the way through to advanced maneuvers and, what you do after the flight.
Right.
So, it's a lot to get through, and we're going to try to synthesize all that information, make sure that you come up with a strong understanding without getting bogged down in too much detail.
That's the goal, to be able to take this deep dive without feeling like you're, reading a textbook.
Exactly.
We're going to be your guides.
Guides.
Through all this information.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get right to it. First question, and it's a big one. How do these things, these engineless aircraft, actually get up into the air?
Well, I mean, you got to think about the early days of gliders.
Right.
This document mentions bungee cords.
Bungee cords, okay.
Which were used especially for launching off hills.
Off a hill, yeah.
So picture this like a giant slingshot, right? You'd secure the tail, attach a stretched bungee cord to the nose of the glider, and then let go of the tail, and that would give it that initial airspeed.
Wow. That sounds, I don't know, a little bit jerky, maybe?
It is. I actually once read a story about a pilot who learned to fly using bungee launches.
No kidding.
Yeah, he described the initial jolt as, well, quite something.
I bet. So that's a far cry from how things are done today, right?
Oh, absolutely. As gliders have evolved and as they've gotten bigger, those initial launch methods have become a lot more sophisticated, a lot more controlled.
Yeah.
The document talks about car towing,
Yeah.
where a vehicle pulls the glider along the ground until it reaches takeoff speed. You've also got powered winches, which use a long cable to basically just yank the glider up into the sky.
Okay.
And then maybe the most popular method these days is airplane towing, or what's called aero towing.
Okay. Aero towing, I like that. So each one of those obviously has its own specific procedures, safety considerations. I mean, it's not as simple as just attaching a rope and going, is it?
No, not at all.
So the document talks about ground operations and the risks involved even before you get a glider off the ground. And one thing they specifically mentioned is the wingspan.
Oh, absolutely. That's a big one, right?
Yeah, I mean, gliders, they've got these slender fuselages, right?
Long, slender fuselage.
And those wings, they're massive. So wingtip strikes are a big concern.
Definitely. They can happen during taxiing, takeoff, landing. I mean, any maneuver, really, where you're close to the ground, you got to be extra careful.
Right.
And the consequences, I mean, they can range from, something relatively minor, like a ground loop,
Right.
to something much more serious, like a cartwheel. I mean, you can imagine.
Yeah.
A cartwheel with a glider, that could be pretty devastating. Not just damage to the aircraft, but, potential injury as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So meticulous attention to detail, comprehensive training, those things are not optional.
Not option at all. They're absolutely essential.
Essential. Okay, so let's move on to aero towing, since it's such a common way to get these things up in the air. I mean, I can imagine communication is key here, right?
Absolutely. Communication is absolutely vital. And there's a whole system of visual signals that are used before the glider even starts moving.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. These pre-launch signals are kind of like the primary way that the glider pilot, the tow pilot, and the ground crew, especially that wing runner,
Right.
all communicate with each other.
Okay.
So the document actually lists several key signals.
Let's hear them.
Raising a wingtip, that means the glider needs to be leveled. Making a thumb circle, that signals that the flight controls are good, they're free. A slow arm movement that tells the tow pilot to open or close the tow hook. Holding both arms steady, that means take up the slack in the tow line. Rapid circles with your hands, that means begin takeoff. And then waving an arm or drawing your hand across your throat, those mean either stop everything or release the tow line.
Okay, so it's like learning a whole new language.
It really is. It's a silent language, but it's absolutely crucial that everyone understands it perfectly.
Yeah, there's no room for misinterpretation there.
Not at all.
And it doesn't end once you're in the air, does it? There are in-flight signals too, right?
There are. Even though radio communication is often used, these visual signals are still a really important backup.
especially in those first few moments of flight.
Especially near the ground, yeah, where verbal communication could be, well, distracting. You need to be focused on controlling the glider.
Yeah, for sure.
So there are specific signals for things like adjusting the airspeed. The glider pilot can yaw the glider, move the tail left and right,
Yeah.
to tell the tow pilot to decrease the airspeed, or rock the wings to request an increase.
Okay.
And for turns, the glider pilot will gently use the rudder to pull the tow plane's tail in the opposite direction. So pulling right to turn the tow plane left and vice versa.
Okay.
Now, if the tow plane rocks its wings, that's the signal for the glider can release.
Right.
And conversely, if the tow plane's rapidly fanning its rudder, that's a problem, and the glider pilot should respond by deploying their air brakes.
Got it. So it's really all about clear, unambiguous communication no matter where you are in the flight.
That's it, exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about the actual takeoff, getting that glider off the ground. Now, the document mentions two types of takeoffs, assisted and unassisted.
Right.
So what's the big difference there?
Well, the key difference is whether or not there's a wing runner helping out.
A wing runner.
Yeah, a member of the ground crew who actually holds onto the wingtip and keeps those wings level during the initial takeoff roll.
Okay.
An assisted takeoff is definitely the preferred method just because it provides that extra stability and significantly reduces the risk of a wingtip hitting the ground.
Right.
An unassisted takeoff, well, as you might guess, there's no wing runner.
Got it.
And there's usually reserved for more experienced pilots and only in specific conditions.
Yeah, I can see why. So let's walk through a normal assisted takeoff. What are the steps involved?
Well, it all starts with hooking up the tow rope
Okay.
and making sure that the glider pilot's in the cockpit.
Right.
They need to make sure that the tow release mechanism is working properly, and then the ground crew will apply tension to the tow line.
Got it.
Often the pilot will perform a release check at this point, just to be sure,
Yeah, absolutely. Safety first.
Always. Once the tow line is reconnected, the wing runner moves to the downwind wingtip. They need to make sure that the takeoff and landing areas are clear. And when the pilot gives the signal, they lift the wing, and at the same time, they signal to the tow pilot to take up any remaining slack in the line.
Okay. So it's a real coordinated effort here.
It is, very much so.
Everyone has to be on the same page.
Absolutely. The glider pilot then signals that they're ready by wagging the glider's runner.
Okay.
At the same time, the wing runner signals to the tow pilot to start the takeoff roll. And if they're using radios, the pilot might also say something like, "Canopy locked, ready for takeoff."
Okay. So once the glider starts rolling down the runway, what happens then?
The wing runner is going to run alongside, keeping the wings level until the glider pilot has enough control to do it themselves.
Right.
Which usually happens when they start to feel more resistance on the ailerons, or, when the glider going too fast for the wing runner to keep up safely.
Makes sense.
In the beginning, the pilot's mostly just using the rudder to steer, to keep aligned with the tow plane.
Okay.
That's important in those early stages to avoid, accidentally dropping a wingtip and hitting the ground.
Right.
I mean, gliders, they have a long wingspan and a relatively short landing gear.
Right.
Compared to a powered aircraft.
Yeah, absolutely. So once it's airborne, what happens?
So once the glider is a few feet off the ground, the pilot's going to maintain that low altitude, just using gentle pressure on the control stick forward or backward.
Okay.
And as the airspeed increases, the controls become more effective, and the pilot will start using the ailerons and rudder to position the glider right behind the tow plane's tail.
Okay.
But it's important not to climb too aggressively right after takeoff.
Why is that?
Well, because you could actually lift the tow plane's tail.
Oh, I see.
And even force its propeller down towards the runway.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. Okay, so what about an unassisted takeoff? How does that work?
So for an unassisted takeoff, you'd usually start with the glider positioned a little bit off the runway centerline.
Okay.
At an angle maybe 10 to 20 degrees, with one wing actually resting on the ground.
On the ground, okay.
So when the tow plane starts moving, the wing that's on the ground, that's going to have more drag.
Right.
And that drag actually helps the glider to straighten out behind the tow plane.
Okay, so it's kind of self-correcting in a way.
In a way, yeah. And as soon as the pilot has enough airspeed to make those controls effective, they'll use the rudder to raise the lower wing and the ailerons to level both wings. Now, trying to do an unassisted takeoff with the glider perfectly aligned, that's actually riskier.
Okay.
Because that drag on the grounded wing can cause it to swerve or even do a ground loop.
Yeah.
So you want to start at a bit of an angle.
Okay. Got it. Now, weather is a big factor in all aspects of aviation, right?
Huge factor, absolutely.
So how do crosswind takeoffs work in a glider?
Well, crosswinds definitely add a level of complexity.
I can imagine.
The basic idea is to stop the glider from weather vaning.
Weather vaning.
Yeah, turning into the wind
Right.
while it's still on the ground. And you also want to stop it from getting blown off the runway once it's in the air.
Okay.
So for an assisted crosswind takeoff, the pilot will tell the wing runner to hold the upwind wing a little bit lower than the downwind wing.
Okay.
At the beginning of the takeoff roll, the pilot will apply full aileron into the wind. So if the wind's coming from the right, they'll hold the control stick all the way to the right.
Got it.
And then they'll use downwind rudder as needed to keep going straight down the runway.
Okay.
Now, gliders that use a center of gravity or CG tow hook, those can be a little bit trickier in crosswinds.
How so?
Well, as the glider picks up speed, the crosswind kind of turns into more of a headwind.
Okay.
And the pilot will gradually reduce the aileron input, but they'll still keep enough pressure to prevent that upwind wing from lifting too early.
So it's a constant adjustment.
Constant adjustment, yeah.
Okay, what about an unassisted crosswind takeoff?
So for an unassisted crosswind takeoff, the pilot will position the glider on the upwind side of the runway,
Okay,
a little bit off the center line,
got it.
and they'll have the downwind wing on the ground with the glider angled into the wind, maybe 20 to 30 degrees.
Okay,
And just like a normal unassisted takeoff, that extra drag on the downwind wing helps level the wings as the glider accelerates.
okay.
Now, starting with the downwind wing aligned with the runway, that's a big no-no in a crosswind.
Yeah,
Because you could easily end up in a ground loop.
okay.
Once that upwind wing lifts off, then the pilot can go back to those standard crosswind controls.
Okay,
Now, if the crosswind is particularly strong, the tow pilot might actually angle the tow plane into the wind as well.
oh, interesting. So they're working together to sort of minimize that crosswind effect on the glider.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Now, this document also mentions something called pilot-induced oscillations, or PIOs. And apparently these can happen during the launch phase.
Yeah, they can.
So what are PIOs, and how can pilots avoid them?
Well, PIOs are basically just unwanted movements in the aircraft caused by the pilot's own control inputs.
Oh, okay.
So during that initial takeoff roll, when the airspeed's low,
Yeah,
the control surfaces, the ailerons, the rudder, and the elevator, they're not as effective.
okay.
And that can create something called control lag, where the glider doesn't respond to the pilot's commands right away.
I see.
So if the pilot overreacts and makes big control inputs, that can lead to oscillations where the glider starts swinging back and forth.
So it's sort of like a delayed reaction.
It is, yeah, and the pilot's inputs can actually amplify those movements, making things worse.
So how do you avoid that?
Patience, lots of patience.
Oh, yeah.
Don't try to lift off until you've got good control response. And then once you're airborne, stay low.
Okay.
Just 2 to 4 feet above the runway. That'll help to dampen out any unwanted pitch changes.
Makes sense.
It's also important to have the elevator trim and the wing flaps set correctly,
Right.
because those can also cause PIOs.
Okay. How so?
Well, if you take off too early because of the wrong flap settings, you might find yourself over-controlling the elevator just to try and stay level.
I see.
And on the other hand, if you take off too late because of negative flaps, the glider could balloon upwards,
Right.
and then you'd have to fight to get it back down.
Okay. It's a very fine balance.
Very fine balance. It's kind of like trying to balance a pole on your hand,
Right.
If you overcorrect to one side, you're probably going to swing too far the other way.
Yeah, that makes sense. So PIOs are similar.
Exactly. It's all about smooth and controlled inputs, especially when the aircraft's not super stable at low speed.
Okay, so what about external factors? Like, what if there's a sudden gust of wind?
Gusts can definitely throw things off. Whether it's a headwind gust or a crosswind gust, they can cause those unwanted oscillations
During takeoff.
during takeoff or even in the initial climb.
Okay.
A headwind gust will usually cause pitch oscillations, while a crosswind gust can affect both yaw and roll stability.
Right.
The general advice is to increase your takeoff speed a little bit if it's gusty.
Okay.
That'll give you better control response and a bigger safety margin above the stall speed. But, and this is a big but,
Yeah.
you've got to make sure that your increased airspeed doesn't go over the glider's tow speed limits.
Right.
You don't want to put too much stress on the tow line or the glider itself.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there are a few things to think about.
So what are some other common mistakes that pilots make during takeoff?
Well, there are a few. Sometimes it's just having the glider configured wrong before takeoff.
Okay. Like what?
Like the flaps might be set wrong or the trim might be off,
Okay,
positioning the controls incorrectly,
right.
misinterpreting the signals from the ground crew or the tow pilot.
I see.
And then there's not maintaining alignment with the tow plane.
Right.
And then, climbing too aggressively right after liftoff.
Okay.
That's a common one. And then there are pilot-induced roll or yaw oscillations.
So overcorrecting.
Overcorrecting, yeah. Like if a wingtip drops too low or the glider starts to veer off course.
Okay.
The key thing to remember is if you ever feel like you're losing control, just release the tow line.
Right.
That's the safest thing to do, always.
Absolutely. So once you're successfully off the ground, there's still the climb out. And the document talks about these things called high tow and low tow positions.
Right.
What's the difference?
So high tow is when the glider is flying slightly above the wake turbulence that's coming off the tow plane.
Okay.
And low tow is when it's flying just below it.
Okay, so we talk about positioning relative to the tow plane's wake.
Right.
And why is that important?
Well, flying high tow keeps you clear of that turbulent air, which can make things, bumpy and unpredictable.
Right, of course.
But low tow gives the glider pilot a much better view of the tow plane.
So easier to maintain that alignment.
Exactly. And from an aerodynamic standpoint, low tow can actually be more efficient.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because the slight downward pull from the glider can actually reduce the amount of elevator the tow pilot needs to use.
Interesting.
But flying low tow does mean you're closer to the tow line.
Right.
So there's a slightly higher risk of it getting tangled up with the glider.
Yeah, okay, I could see that. So what does the pilot do during the climb out? Like, how do they maintain the right position?
They mostly use visual cues, looking at where the tow plane is in relation to the glider's nose and wings.
Okay.
The tow pilot will be trying to maintain a steady pitch and power, and the glider pilot just needs to follow along.
Okay, got it. So what about turns during the climb out? How do they coordinate those?
Well, usually the tow pilot will initiate the turn.
Okay.
They'll use a smooth, shallow bank angle.
Right.
And the glider pilot, they just have to watch the tow plane carefully and match that bank angle as closely as possible.
Got it.
A good visual reference is to aim for the tow plane's outside wingtip as it turns.
Okay.
You see, if the glider banks more steeply than the tow plane, it'll turn tighter.
Right.
And that can create slack in the tow line.
Yeah, I see.
And the glider could lose airspeed.
Right.
On the other hand, if the glider banks less steeply, the tow line will get taut, and the glider could accelerate and climb too abruptly.
So coordination is key here.
Absolutely.
Wait, the document also mentions that the characteristics of the tow line and even the types of tow hook you're using, those can also play a role in PIOs.
They can. The length of the tow line is particularly important.
Okay, how so?
If it's too short, the glider is going to be right in the middle of that turbulent wake from the tow plane.
Right.
And that can make it really hard to contain a stable position. And that increases the chance of PIOs.
Okay.
So generally, a minimum length of 200 feet is recommended.
Okay, so give yourself some space.
Exactly. Now, the type of tow hook also matters.
Okay.
Whether it's a CG hook, which is at the center of gravity,
Right.
or a belly hook, because the location of the hook can actually affect how the glider pitches when the tension in the tow line changes.
Okay, so it's like a lever arm, basically.
It is. And a CG hook, because it's below the glider's center line, it can make the nose pitch up when the tow line tension increases.
Right.
And pitch down when the tension decreases.
So the pilot needs to be aware of that.
Very aware. And make smooth control inputs. You don't want to overcorrect and end up in a PIO.
So what are some common errors pilots make during the climb-out phase of an aero tow?
Not staying in the right position relative to the tow plane.
High tow or low tow?
Right. Accidentally getting into the tow plane's wake.
Right.
And not staying aligned with the tow plane, especially during turns.
Okay.
Those are the big ones.
Okay, got it. Now, another term that comes up in the context of aero towing is slack line.
Uh-huh.
What are the common causes of a slack line, and what should a pilot do if it happens?
So a slack line is basically just when the tow line loses tension.
Right.
And there are a few things that can cause that. The tow plane might suddenly reduce power,
Okay.
or it might start to descend.
Right.
And the glider could turn inside the tow plane's turn radius.
Okay.
Or the two aircraft could hit updrafts or downdrafts at different times or with different intensities.
So a lot of things can cause it.
There are a lot of variables up there.
And what do you do if it happens?
Well, the first thing you do is check if you can still see the tow rope and the tow plane.
Okay.
If you can't,
Yeah.
that release the tow line immediately.
Right, because you don't know what's going on.
Exactly. It's better to be flying on your own than to risk a collision or something like that.
Absolutely. So you're saying that in that moment of uncertainty, regaining that independent control, that's the priority.
It's a top priority, yeah. Safety first.
Safety first. So what if the slack line isn't so severe?
Okay, so if you can still see the tow rope and the tow plane,
Yeah.
the glider will often naturally pull back into position.
Okay.
But if it doesn't, the pilot can use the spoilers, or the dive brakes, to slow the glider down gently.
Right.
And that'll take up the slack, and once the line's taut again, then the pilot can get back into the correct high tow or low tow position.
Okay, great.
But the key is to be smooth. No jerky movements.
Right.
You don't want to put extra stress on anything.
Makes sense. So this maneuver called boxing the wake, what's that all about?
Boxing the wake is a way for a pilot to show that they know how to handle their glider safely around the tow plane's wake.
Okay.
That wake turbulence.
Right.
It's a way to demonstrate their skill and their awareness.
Got it.
It's basically just flying a rectangular pattern around that wake.
Okay.
The pilot always needs to let the tow pilot know they're going to do it.
Right.
And it should only be done away from the airport traffic pattern and above 1,000 feet.
Okay.
Safety first, as always.
So how does it work?
Well, it usually starts from a high tow position.
Okay.
The glider pilot will descend through the wake to a low tow position. Then they'll move to one side of the tow plane while staying at that low altitude.
Okay.
Then they'll ascend back up through the wake to a high tow position on that side. Then move across to the other side of the tow plane at the high tow altitude.
Okay.
Descend back down through the wake to a low tow position on that side, and then finally move back to the original low tow position and climb back up to high tow.
Wow. That's a lot of maneuvering.
It is. It requires a lot of coordination and a really good awareness of where the tow plane is and how that wake turbulence is affecting you.
Yeah, sounds like it. So what are some common mistakes that pilots make when they're trying to box the wake?
Making the pattern too big or too small.
Okay.
That's a common one. And if it's too big, you're not really experiencing the wake.
Right.
And if it's too small, you're getting too close to the tow plane.
Right. Yeah, definitely don't want to do that.
No. And not coordinating your control inputs.
Okay.
That can lead to jerky movements.
Right.
And, making those abrupt changes in altitude or position.
Okay.
That can also make it hard to judge the wake's effects.
And lastly, allowing too much slack to develop in the tow line.
Right. That can make it harder to get back into a stable tow position.
Okay, so it's all about precision and control.
It is.
All right, now finally, let's talk about releasing from the tow. How does that work?
So when you reach the release point, which is usually at a certain altitude and location,
Right.
the first thing you got to do is clear the airspace.
Look around.
Look around, yeah. Make sure there are no other aircraft around.
Okay.
Because the standard procedure is for the glider to turn 90 degrees to the right after release,
Okay.
and the tow plane turns left.
Okay.
So you need to make sure you've got plenty of space.
Right.
Now, for a good, clean release, you want the tow line to be under a bit of tension
Okay.
because that helps the release mechanism on the glider to work smoothly.
Got it.
The glider pilot needs to actually see that the tow line is detached before starting that right turn.
Okay.
And the tow pilot, they'll watch the glider release, watch it turn, and then they'll turn left and descend away from the release point.
Okay.
And they'll usually keep an eye on the glider, if they can, as they head back to the airport.
Okay. What are some common errors that happen during the release?
Trying to release when there's slack in the tow line,
Right.
that can sometimes stop the hook from opening properly.
Okay.
Not clearing the airspace before releasing.
Right.
Not actually checking that the tow line's released before turning.
Okay.
Not making a decisive 90-degree turn.
I see.
Releasing too close to other aircraft.
Right.
And either pilot losing sight of the other aircraft right after release.
Okay.
So, sticking to those standard procedures really does help to ensure a safe separation, even if you lose sight of each other for a moment.
Absolutely. Okay, so aerotowing is one method, but as we mentioned earlier, gliders can also be launched from the ground using winches or vehicles, and they use a different kind of tow hook, right?
That's right. For ground launches, they almost always use a center of gravity, or CG tow hook.
Okay.
And those hooks, they have this really important safety feature, an automatic back release mechanism.
What's that?